You never understand true fear until someone you love becomes someone or something you don't recognize. That's what happened to my sister. It started 2 years ago in our quiet village in the eastern region of Ghana. Life was simple then. My father worked on the family farm, my mother sold wares at the local market, and I, being the eldest, helped wherever I was needed. My younger sister, Oma, was our joy, kind-hearted, soft-spoken, and obedient. Everyone in the village liked Oma. But if I've learned anything, it's that darkness creeps in silently. Without warning, one night, Oma woke up screaming so loudly that it jolted the whole household awake. I ran to her room and found her sitting on the floor, trembling. She was holding her knees tightly against her chest, her eyes darting around the dimly lit room like she was looking for something or someone. "What is it, Oma? What happened?" I asked. She shook her head but didn't answer. When Mama and Papa arrived moments later, she whispered, "It's nothing. Just a bad dream. Just a bad dream. Why were you screaming like that?" I pressed, but she didn't reply. Later that night, she crawled into my room, lay on a mat on the floor, and begged to sleep there. Oma, who had never been afraid of the dark, suddenly refused to sleep alone. The following morning, we tried to get her to talk. At first, she avoided the subject, but when we insisted, she told us about her dream. "There was a woman standing by my bed," she said quietly, avoiding eye contact. She was wearing black. Her face was blurry, but I knew she was staring at me. And she was whispering something, but I couldn't hear the words. I dismissed it. I told her she was overthinking things and that she should pray before going to bed to protect herself from nightmares. But Mama noticed the fear in Oma's eyes. It wasn't just a bad dream, something had changed in her. At first, nothing else seemed strange. Oma helped around the house as usual. She went to school, laughed with her friends, and played in the afternoons. But after about a week, she started acting distant. She stopped talking as much during meals and stayed quiet for long stretches. Then there was her temper, which had never been an issue before. One afternoon, Mama asked her to fetch water from the well, and Oma outright refused. The words she used, sharp, bitter, weren't hers. It shocked everyone, especially Papa. "Oma," he said sternly. "What's wrong with you? Don't talk to your mother like that." Oma glared at him, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that chilled me. There was anger, yes, but there was something else, something darker. She apologized reluctantly, but the damage was done. Papa started watching her more closely. So did I, and then came the sleep talking. One night, while we were all asleep, I heard murmuring from Oma's room. At first, I thought she was praying, but as I approached, I realized it was something else. Her voice, normally soft, was low and harsh. She was saying words in a language I didn't recognize, and the tone was unlike anything I had heard before. I stood frozen at the door, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, she turned to face me, though her eyes were closed, and whispered, "She's here." I bolted back to my room, my heart racing. Things escalated quickly after that. Oma started seeing the woman from her dreams during the day. "She's always at the edge of the farm," Oma said one afternoon, her voice shaky. "She doesn't come close. But she's watching." At that point, Mama decided we couldn't handle this on our own. She took Oma to the herbalist, Kwaku Adede, in the next village. Everyone in the area knew him for his knowledge of traditional medicine and spiritual matters. After listening to Oma's account, Kwaku nodded gravely. "This is not ordinary," he said. "The spirit of a sacred grove has attached itself to her. It could have been something as simple as stepping into the grove unknowingly or disturbing its peace." "But why her?" Mama asked, almost in tears. "These spirits don't need a reason," Kwaku said. "They are powerful, and they don't like to be disrespected." He gave us a ritual to perform, involving herbs, water, and prayers. "And tell her to pray every day," he added. "No matter what happens, prayer is her strongest shield." The ritual didn't help. That same night, Oma screamed again. This time, the sound of her voice was even more piercing, filled with pain and something that felt otherworldly. When we rushed to her room, she was already at the door, trying to leave the house. "She's calling me," Oma said in a monotone voice, pointing toward the dark field outside. Papa grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. "Oma, stop it. She has no power here." Oma blinked and suddenly began sobbing. "She's everywhere, Papa," she cried. "She's everywhere." We stayed up the entire night praying over Oma. Papa led the prayers, calling on God to deliver his daughter from whatever had taken hold of her. But as we prayed, strange things began happening. The kerosene lamp flickered wildly, even though there was no wind. The air grew heavy, and shadows seemed to move across the walls on their own. Oma let out a low laugh, a sound that did not belong to her. She was sitting in the middle of the room, rocking back and forth. Her eyes rolled back, and a deep, raspy voice said, "She is mine." That moment shook all of us. Mama cried openly. Papa grabbed his Bible and began shouting verses, pacing back and forth across the room. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," he yelled. "You have no power here, spirit." Oma collapsed to the ground, writhing like someone was holding her down. She clawed at her own skin, crying out in pain. Her voice kept shifting. One moment it was hers, and the next, it was the deep, guttural voice from before. This went on for what felt like hours. Papa never stopped praying, even as his voice grew hoarse. "Keep going," he shouted at me and Mama. "Pray with me. Pray for her." The house felt like a battlefield. And prayer, as strange as it may sound, felt like the only weapon we had. Finally, just before dawn, Oma let out one last scream. She collapsed, completely still. The air in the room lightened, and the shadows disappeared. She opened her eyes, and they were hers again. The next day, we took Oma to the church. The pastor performed more prayers of deliverance and urged us to never stop praying as a family. He reminded us that faith was like a shield, and without it, we were vulnerable. Oma slowly recovered, but she was never the same. For months, she refused to go near the edge of the farm, let alone talk about the woman in black. Even now, years later, she flinches at any mention of sacred groves or spirits, and me. I learned a lesson that will stay with me forever. Prayer is not just something you do in passing, it's a lifeline. It's the only thing that kept my family together during that terrifying time. If you ever find yourself in a situation where the unseen feels too close, don't wait. Pray.